Most people think they know Viking mythology. Odin, Thor, Valhalla, warriors dying in glorious battle and feasting forever in the golden halls of the gods, drinking mead, laughing, preparing for the final war at the end of the world. It is a comfortable version of Norse belief, heroic, clean, easy to sell on cinema screens and television shows. But that version leaves something out. Something that made experienced warriors, men who sailed through storms that swallowed entire fleets, sleep with weapons beside them. Not because of enemies outside the walls, but because of what might come through the walls. The Norse people believed that death was a door, and that some things refused to walk through it properly. Some of them turned around and came back. Not as whispers, not as cold spots in a room. The Norse belief was far more physical than that, far more terrifying than anything a modern horror film has managed to recreate. They believed the dead could return in their own bodies, full size, full weight, breathing, moving, entering the same homes and villages that had once known them. The Draugr, pronounced Draugr, appears across hundreds of years of Norse writing, in Iceland, in Norway, in Sweden, in accounts written by people who had never met each other, who lived generations apart, who described the same creature using almost identical language separated by hundreds of miles of open ocean. That consistency is what makes it impossible to dismiss. The word translates directly from Old Norse, not ghost, not spirit, not shadow, one who walks after death. The physical descriptions across these separate accounts are striking in how precisely they match. The Draugr was unnaturally large, larger than it had been in life, as if death had expanded it from the inside. People who had known the individual before death described not recognizing them, not because the face had completely changed, but because the scale was wrong, because whatever stood in front of them occupied more space than a human body should. Its skin had turned the blue-black of a deep bruise spread across every surface, or sometimes the pale gray of ice frozen and thawed too many times. Either way, it was a color that did not belong on anything still moving through the world. Its eyes did not close, open, fixed, seeing everything with the absolute attention of something that has nothing else to do but watch. And then the smell. It arrived before the Draugr did, always, without exception in any account. A wave of decay so complete and overwhelming that witnesses described losing the ability to think, dropping to their knees without understanding why, vision narrowing before the creature had even entered the room. By the time you saw it clearly, it was already far too close. These were not frightened villagers inventing monsters in the dark. These were warriors, sailors, people who had looked real death in the face without flinching, and they were terrified.
Now here is where it becomes important to understand how a Draugr came to exist. The Norse believed that certain people did not move on after death. Those who died with unfinished business, those who were greedy or violent in life, those buried incorrectly. But the most dangerous Draugr were those who simply refused to accept the death applied to them. Before burial, the body had to be prepared with extreme care. The toes were tied together so the Draugr could not walk if it rose. Iron scissors were placed open on the chest because iron was believed to repel the undead. Needles were pushed into the soles of the feet, making movement unbearably painful. And scissors were nailed above every doorway in the surrounding village, just in case. These were not superstitions performed by people who did not know better. These were practical precautions taken by experienced people who had seen what happened when they were not followed. The Laxdæla Saga records the account of a man named Hrapp, a real person, violent and cruel in life. Before he died, he gave his wife one specific instruction: Bury me standing upright beneath the threshold of my own home, so that even in death I can watch over what is mine." She did as he asked. Within weeks, the accounts begin. Farmhands started dying with no explanation. Neighbors reported seeing Hrapp walking at night, full size, physical, leaving footprints in frozen mud. His wife stopped sleeping. Entire families abandoned their farms. A warrior named Olaf was eventually brought in specifically to deal with what Hrapp had become. When Olaf dug up the burial mound, he found something the saga records without commentary or elaboration. Hrapp's body had not decayed. After years in the ground, completely intact. Olaf removed the body, burned it entirely, and scattered the ashes into open water. Only then did the deaths stop. The Draugr's strength went beyond anything the Norse had natural language for. The Eyrbyggja saga describes a Draugr killing a sleeping man not by striking him, not by any deliberate act of violence, simply by sitting on him. The weight alone was enough. If a Draugr had already risen, only one method stopped it. A warrior had to physically wrestle it back into its grave, then decapitate it, place the head between the feet, burn everything that remained. Archaeologists working across Scandinavia have found Viking graves showing exactly this. Bodies with heads removed and placed between the feet, limbs separated deliberately, signs of post-burial interference carried out with urgency. They call it ritual, they call it superstition, but the people who dug up those graves in the frozen dark, hands shaking, torches burning low, had a different word for it: necessary. The Norse did not invent the Draugr to explain their fears. They documented it to warn each other. These accounts were written as records, not as stories. And once you understand that, they stop feeling like mythology. They start feeling like testimony from people who saw something real, who survived it or did not, who wrote it down because they needed whoever came after them to understand one simple thing. The dead do not always stay where you leave them. Some of them remember the way back, and when they find it, they go home.